Welcome to Senate Education Friday, April 22nd, 2019. We're going to start with H716. We're going to move that off of the bottom of the agenda, move it to the top. Daphne, do you have copies? Yeah. This is House Bill 716, their miscellaneous education bill. And we're going to have this will go to, I talked to our colleagues in economic development for about an hour this morning about this bill and a bunch of other things, as well as our amendments to 703. This may pop up in different spots, but we're putting it on here as well with the hopes that it'll make it through the section having to do with the teacher workforce. Ms. St. James, any clarifying comments? The bill has not changed since we have last seen it. That is correct? So the first part has to do with the census grants, then we move into Holocaust education report, the crime insurance coverage for school districts, and the workforce development work, and then effective dates. Senator Pertlick.
This was the place that had the rule suspension?
This had the rule suspension. We have removed it, and it'll now go on to H101, which will allow us to take a little testimony, additional testimony and conversation and work on Tuesday. And it's really just to give us a little extra time, because I think the committee, at least I keep going kind of back and forth on it. And I think others are as well. Anything else from you, Ms. St. James?
No, thank you. Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. This draft is exactly the same draft you looked at yesterday.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve draft 6.1?
So moved.
So moved by Senator Terenzini. Questions, discussion? If not, Senator Persick, would you call the roll?
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Hooker.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Keep it open for.
Okay. Senator Pertlick votes yes. Senator Terenzini.
Yes.
Senator Campbell.
Yes. Daphne, would you please text Senator Lyons and ask her to come in and vote? That'd be great. And we'll keep this open for a little bit, but right now it is, looks like it's 401. Senator Terenzini is going to be the reporter. Thanks for your leadership. I'm sorry, 501. Thank you.
You keep thinking that it's not on the
I know. That's what everybody's always telling me. I'm like, yeah, he's there. Thanks for your leadership at the Holocaust stuff. Thanks for taking this on.
Thank you for sticking with it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is important. And if the House for some reason has concerns, we'll have you at the negotiating table to make sure that.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Reporter.
Senator Terenzini. Okay. Thank you. We'll keep that open for Senator Lyons, and then we'll have Senator Terenzini bring that up for 4:15. Moving on, H727. We have a new draft before us. And this is the entire bill with the changes that we have made thus far. Not a lot. And what I'm going to ask Ms. St. James to do is to take us through this bill with, of course, just the changes, just the edits that we have made now. This is the entire bill altogether. Changes are in yellow.
They're in yellow, the printed copy.
Printed copies, yes, in yellow. Yep, there aren't a lot, mostly toward the end, but you'll see a couple of ones sort of midway through as well. I've not had a chance to read this in copy, and everybody else has, but
I was hoping Beth could read from the start again. What do you think, Beth?
That's knows it by heart now.
Not a joke for a Friday.
Yeah. Ms. St. James, thank you very much, Shirley, for all your work on this. And if you would please take us through the amendments.
Sure, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. So you have a strike all amendment before you. It's the first amendment that you've seen on this bill. so far, you've really only been looking at the as passed by language with a couple orphan documents floating around. So this draft 1.1 of your strike all amendment contains chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3, and then the study and moratorium language we talked about yesterday is at the very end, so it's easy to remove or add depending on your decisions. So the first change to the as passed by version of the House occurs on page 62, and there's no highlighting because there was actually a deletion.
Okay,
There was a paragraph, a subsection that said, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, neither the electorate nor the board shall amend a union district's articles of agreement in a matter that is otherwise contrary to law. That was not necessary, and the committee decided that if it wasn't necessary, let's remove it. So subsection G in section 722 just does not exist anymore. So there's no highlighting there.
okay,
The second, the next amendment, I'm going to stop counting already. So the next place there is a change is on page 67. It is perhaps the smallest change, and that was on line 18. There was a request to change the article on line 18 instead of the proposed operational date to a proposed operational date.
right, thank you.
Page 68. There were several places in the draft as passed by the House where there was discussion about why there wasn't any sort of timeline or date certain. And so I took notes on that and then inserted, to the best of my ability, at least a starting date certain or time frame. So on page 68, there was no time frame here before. It just said that the union district shall invite the members of the withdrawal study committee. So we've added on line 15 within 45 days of receipt, and there should be an of there of the withdrawal study committee report.
Okay,
Yes,
this is page 68, center line. We're just going through. This is the
okay.
clean copy, well, edited copy now, first full version of 727. We did vote on miscellaneous ed bill H716. And we left it open.
Okay.
Senator Tanzini is presenting the bill, but Senator Perswick is the clerk.
Senator Lyons votes yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So Daphne, if you could give us a clean copy for Senator.
Did you vote yes?
You're the only yes. There we go. Bill,
Everybody else, oh, yes.
Not just you. Sorry about that, Ms. St. James, until you're using your patience with me.
I got. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Linda.
69.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next change is on page 69, again, adding a time frame here. So within 45 days of receipt of the withdrawal study committee report, that action shall occur. And then again, the same thing on line 20, within 45 days of the receipt of the report. Any questions on that time frame?
No.
The next change is on page 71. And again, this is an addition of a time frame requiring that the state board issues their advisory opinion within 90 days of receipt of the study committee report and the agency's recommendation.
Thank you.
And then again, on same page, lines 15 through 16, same addition, 90 days. And then on page 72, we are in the, let's see. This is the withdrawal section of H727. And so on when there's a vote on the withdrawal proposal, it needs to be ratified by all the towns within the union district in order to, or member districts, to approve the withdrawal proposal. So there was a question, a very good question, about whether there should be any reference to commingling here, because if you need to see the results by town, commingling seems to be counterintuitive. So the change here on page 72, lines 18 through 19 is the section reference there that's highlighted on the end of line 18 used to read 742, which was the commingling statute. So I've taken out reference to that section. So it just refers to section 739 through 741 are the other provisions that relate to Australian ballot voting for a unified union school district. And then I added a specific sentence saying the ballot shall not be commingled. I don't think this is absolutely necessary, but given the focus and the discussion on clarity around this topic, I added that language.
Okay, thank you. Senator,
So I'm completely fine with this. I've gone through some recounts, and that when commingling has happened is in the recount where you just got all the ballots from the different areas. Does this apply to also recounts when it might make sense for them to allow it to commingle the ballots? The day of the election, it's really useful that they can keep them in each of the polling locations. But if you're doing a recount when they've all been concentrated in one location, commingling is not necessarily a bad idea. Does this language also apply to recounts?
So that's a good question. I would have to read it in a little context, but in general, this, regardless of whether you're doing a recount or not, there needs to be a clear ability to see which town approved the withdrawal vote. So even in a recount, commingling doesn't make sense here because you need to know if one specific town voted no, then the withdrawal proposal fails. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in my understanding, but maybe Senator Lyons, who represents CBU or had said no CBU from her Wilson days, does that mean in a recount we have to keep separate that each of the towns are gonna have to take their machines that are configured to the school district and run them there, like physically relocate the machines configured to process those ballots?
So this is about withdrawal, so that hasn't happened. The way it happens now is it's a single district, so all the voters of the district put their ballots all together. So they go from, if you're in the Williston school or your Charlotte school or Shelburne school, those ballots are carried to CVU and then they are just taken and put in the machines and counted without regard to the town. They're all commingled. So because we haven't had a withdrawal vote, and the school hasn't done that. If it were going to be a withdrawal vote, then the clerk would probably would just say, everybody, you can count your votes right there in the town.
To keep the
And-
ballots.
Yeah, and keep the ballots separate.
Seems you'd have to keep them separate until the decision was made.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah,
I just love talking about commingling.
yeah, I know you
And
did.
airports.
Yeah.
You could come out to CVU sometime and we'll let you take the ballots. We'll take the ballots from one school and take them out. Have pizza.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Ms. St. James. Go ahead.
Page 73, line 15, another date reference added. Again, this is consistent with the changes that I made above this section. So it's adding a requirement that within 30 days of receipt of the board's recommendation, the superintendent shall file the withdrawal study committee reports with the towns within the union district and the union district itself. And then in addition of a 90-day time frame to the vote itself. And then page 74, again, similar update on line 5, because there needed to be able to determine the votes by town. I removed the reference to the commingling statute. And then the biggest change here, biggest substantive change we've seen thus far, page 74, line 7. This is where that 60% used to reside. So this is where this is the requirement that the withdrawing town vote first after a negative recommendation. So the draft remains the same, that the withdrawing town needs to vote first. And then the vote, if the withdrawing town approves the withdrawal proposal, then the vote goes to the rest of the union school district to vote. But instead of a 60% threshold to pass the withdrawal proposal, it's now a majority.
Majority, right? Sorry. Great.
Okay, I've got a little checklist here. I'm going as I go here.
Senator Perkwood.
Oh, never mind.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Page 75, again, just a reference to ballots not being commingled during the withdrawal vote because of the need to identify the vote by town. Page 78, another timeline addition that the Secretary of Education shall certify the results after the state board creates the existence of a new school district within 30 days of such action. And then going to page 86.
In committee and Ms. St. James, I'm hoping we could pick up the pace just a little bit, only because I know that Mr. Olson has a 3 o'clock hard stop. So if we could give him at least 10 minutes, that would be great. We could always return to it if we have to.
Sure. So page 86, 87, 88, 89, 92, all the way to 92. Those are just time frames added.
Great.
And then if you go to page 93, there is the other 60%. So remember, there was the Unified Union School District section, and then now the Union Elementary or Union High School section. And so again, that 60% was removed and replaced with the majority.
Our 93 is
92.
clean. Oh, 92.
It's on
Okay.
the bottom.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Here we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes,
92.
And at the bottom of page 88 and then part of 89, there is a non-date thing. Including
Oh.
most people.
Yep. So that language was appeared in the Unified Union School District section and not in the Union Elementary. And I think that was just an oversight. The importance of including the most feasible option, including in the analysis, the most feasible options for provision of supervisory union services. So I made sure to add it to this section when I found that going through this. Is that all right?
Yes.
Page 106 is the bonding language, or the first instance of bonding language update.
Okay.
And bonding language updates appear on 106, 112, 131, 137. And that was all in relation to the School Board Association's request.
Okay.
And then the big substantive change, other than the requiring majority vote instead of 60% vote, starts on page 151. And that's the new process for the session law that we discussed yesterday.
Okay.
So starting on page 151.
Okay. Here we go.
I'm still scrolling, bear with me.
No problem. Take your time.
Okay, so we're in section 4 now. So remember, this section only applies to a very limited, specific set of circumstances, and that is if a town has already withdrawn from a unified union school district, and that has been approved by the state board. So on page 151, the first change is that nothing has changed as far as the town still has, the new school district still has to send a status report to the State Board of Education on or before its regular July 2022 meeting. So then the state board review and findings, the first change is that the state board shall consider the status report and issue an advisory opinion on or before its regular August 2022 meeting. I put the dates in this section and I highlighted them in blue because I do think that they need to be looked at to make sure that they are reasonable and they work.
Sure. We'll hear from that.
Yep. So prior to issuing an advisory opinion, the state board shall provide the board of the new school district and other interested community members an opportunity to be heard at a meeting held at a location within the new school district.
Great.
The state board, in its discretion, may also take testimony from other entities, including the union school district and the agency of education. So if the state board does that and it believes that the new school district is likely to be operational, then it gives that likely to be operational advisory opinion, and the new school district goes on its merry way. The big change occurs on page 152, and that is if the advisory opinion is that preparedness is deemed unlikely. So if the state board determines that there's a reasonable risk the new school district will not be prepared, taking into account all of the things it needs to think about in lines 5 through 19, then the board shall issue a written advisory statement detailing those factors, posting it on its website, sending it to the new school district. That's not really a change. Upon receipt of the advisory opinion, the new school district has to post it on its website and schedule the contents for a public meeting. That's not really a change at all, but adding the date within which they need to do that is a change. So that date is new. And then after public discussion and any board deliberations, the board of the new school district shall warn a vote to determine whether to request the state board reverse its declarations approving the withdrawal and reconstituting the new school district, so that off-ramp, because in this situation, the state board of education has already approved the withdrawal. Or the other option in the vote is whether they petition the agency of education for review of the state board's advisory opinion deeming preparedness unlikely. So they're either going to look at that advisory opinion and say, you know what, thank you, state board, we hear you, we're going to take the off, we're going to put this to the voters and ask them if they want to take the off ramp. Or we're going to ask the voters, if you don't want to take the off ramp, then we have to petition the state board of education, or we have to petition the agency of education for review of the state board's unlikeliness determination.
Senator Hooker.
No, I'm
Okay,
just,
okay.
this is.
Senator Persley.
When we say the vote in that subsection C, that's the vote of the board, right?
No, it's a vote of the electorate. So the electorate would be deciding whether to take the off ramp or move forward. But in order to move forward, they've got to ask the agency of education whether they can move forward. And that's that petition process of, and then
So you envision a ballot that has like two options on the ballot, they would choose which one, or three options, I guess?
I mean, I think, yes. So I think this concept can certainly be fleshed out with more detail. But from what I heard yesterday, the desire is to either allow this school district to take the off ramp, to hear the state board in its unlikely determination and say, you're right, we're going to take the off ramp, or it's going to petition, or it wants to go forward. But in order to go forward, it has to have the agency of education's okay to do that, right?
Right.
Isn't that what we talked about yesterday?
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense to me to warn a vote for whether or not you wanted to, well, I guess you could warn a vote to say whether or not you want to take the off ramp. And then there's some sort of mechanism built in that if that vote fails, they don't take the off ramp, then the school board shall petition the agency of education.
Mr. Olson.
Muted.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Thank you. Yes. For the record, Oliver Olson, Chair of the State Board of Education. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I did have a chance to briefly review this. I think I like the thinking here. Just a couple of observations on the dates. I'm very mindful of the remaining district that the community is withdrawing from. And I'm a little concerned with the dates as they're at now, because it puts them in kind of scramble mode if they need to take that community back in terms of their budgeting cycle. So as I was hearing the overview from Ms. St. James, it occurred to me that we could probably short circuit this, and rather than having a vote just provide the study committee with the opportunity to seek that appeal, and that would help sort of compress the timeline by eliminating the need for an extra vote, which I think is helpful to everybody. The other thought is I would actually flip this. Oh, sorry, go
So
ahead.
how does that feel to people?
Who would have the,
This would be allowing the study committee, giving them the authority to appeal? Is that accurate, Mr. Olson?
Yeah, correct. Rather than asking for a vote to make that decision.
but they have to have a public, I think I was thinking of that actually, that they would have the public hearing and they could decide as a public body to vote right there instead of warning an Australian ballot.
But who, you mean,
You'd have-
whoever shows up at the public meeting, tell me what you mean.
Those folks elected to be on the steering committee, or if it's like written that they already have a school board, it wouldn't be a study committee.
Right,
Would hold this hearing, say this is what the board said, don't go ahead, but we're gonna hear from people and they're gonna vote as a board or as a committee
yeah.
to decide which route to take.
Yeah, I have to say, bringing it back to the electorate doesn't, it seems like a bit too much.
And I said study committee, I meant to say school board, so.
Oh, okay, good,
Yep.
okay. So that makes sense. How does that feel to people?
Well, as long as there's that public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that the board can bring back the message to the agency.
The St. James, it looks like we have consensus on that.
But what
Please, go
do
ahead.
we think that will change for the date?
Yeah,
Mr. Olson, please, go ahead.
So the other thing is so by eliminating the need for the warning of vote, you save some time there. So I think if you can move because you want the other district, the remaining district, to know by really October at the latest, I would say, whether they're going to need to budget to bring this other school district back in. And I would defer to like the School Boards Association to provide some more specific sort of drop deadlines and work back from there. But the other thing I just want to highlight, I really like the thinking of having an appeal process, but I would flip this around and I would actually have the Agency of Education, have the secretary provide that opinion with an appeal to the board, only because that's more consistent with current practice. So typically in our operations in relationship with the agency is bringing recommendations to the board or things are happening that then get appealed to the board. And also the agency just has greater, state board, the agency just has greater capacity to do a lot of the more detailed analysis up front.
But Oliver, isn't that a little weird because the board is issuing the opinion to say, don't go forward. So we already know what the board thinks. So to appeal to the board.
No, what I'm saying is rather than having what I'm thinking is with this process, rather than having the board do that upfront analysis, is perhaps we might want to think about having the agency do that, and then the route of appeal is to the board.
That does seem to make more sense to me, even in other things related that we do in natural resources,
We go to the agency.
and then have the final appeal to the board itself. Yeah, Senator Pursley.
I'm okay with that. And I think
Yeah.
on the dates, we could say the September 15th, which is the date that we have on page 152 for the public hearing. That could also be the date that they have the vote. And then they have the October 15th date that would be the last date. That would be the decision from the board to say yes or no on the agency's
Decision.
if it's, and then September 15th, they would appeal or take the off ramp. If they appeal, DOE would decide by October 15th. That way, the other district, the district that they're assumed to back into would have time to budget for it.
Yeah, you probably need a little bit more time just because the board only meets on a monthly basis. So you'd need to have time for the material to, and to get to the board and for the board to hold a hearing and things like that. So you'd probably need like a 2-month window between when the agency renders its opinion and when the board would issue its final opinion after, from that appeal process. But then I would take this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There is a 2-month difference
But there
between the.
Oh, there is. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but there's the middle part. Like August, they issue their decision. September, the town votes off ramp or appeal. October, the board would rule on that appeal.
Yeah, so that only gives the board really 1 month. So that would be my only concern. We might have to play with that a little bit, but before we get into the dates here, I just want to point out, I think this is a really a good concept that I would really recommend having that apply to the main section of the bill as well, rather than the advisory piece, because I think it provides a much better process for everybody involved for the future withdrawals.
To go through the same process.
Same process. Have the agency do the
Come out with an advisory piece, have the board, the school board itself vote on it, whether to move forward or not, depending on what the agency is saying. If they're disagreeing with the agency's recommendation, then it can be appealed to you guys, the state board.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if the state board at that point says no, then it's over. It's terminated. It doesn't
Just
move
say,
forward.
Jane.
I just want to point out that we're talking about this language and situation is for a situation where there already is a new school district and a new school district board. In the withdrawal process, there wouldn't be a board, and the study committee would have already been disbanded after the report goes to the State Board of Education or the Agency of Education, depending on where you go. And then coming up, there's another piece of session law where there isn't a board yet. So there's just interested citizens championing this initiative. So it's clean here. It would just be something to think through for the normal withdrawal process or the section 6, because there's no board, there's no organized group to make those decisions yet.
Mr. Olson, that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah, I think what you could do is just extend the term of the study committee, through the end of that appeal process to represent the interests of the community.
You have to do that.
what do people feel about that?
You have to do that.
If we want to move in that direction. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just wondering if people want to move in that direction.
Yeah.
Donna?
I'm sorry if I'm just being really slow about this, but in the normal appeal process, not in the situation with Ripton where there already is a school board, but in the normal process, are you then saying that that initial decision comes to the agency rather than to the state board, and that the state board doesn't get involved until after there's a vote? Or I don't understand how that process is working, and maybe Beth does, and I just need to be quiet, but I'm not sure I understand how it's working.
Mr. Olson, why don't we do this?
Yeah.
Why don't we not go back and edit the first section right now? Let's keep going with what we're working on. We have a couple more days on this bill when we get back from the weekend, but let's stick with this section and not kind of move around too much. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, no, that's totally fine.
Okay. So as it relates to this section, these are, limited specific circumstances that we're dealing with. Let's just go back to the dates. What are the edits that you'd like to see in the dates?
So I would suggest no later than November 1st, the old school district needs to know whether they're going to have to reabsorb the school district for budgeting purposes. And I would defer to the School Boards Association, to give the final word on that. And then working back from that, the board would need 2 months to hear the appeal, to consider, the arguments, and to render a decision realistically.
And we could just say 2 months, right? I mean, 2 months after a decision.
So while I'm working back from November, because I'm working back from November 1st, I'm calling that like kind of the hard deadline for the old school district to know what's going to happen.
Right.
So that's, October, September. So basically the State Board of Ed would need to know by September 1st whether there's an appeal, so that it has time to process that appeal.
Do you have that, Ms. St. James? Okay.
I hear this. I also just want to throw out there the date right now of enactment of this act is July 1, but that's certainly a moving target, whether that's on passage, which gives extra room. But right now, this wouldn't go into effect until July 1, so it really limits that time frame.
I think we would want to move to on passage just to give people as much time as possible.
Yep.
Mr. Olson.
Okay, so September 1st was the deadline for the appeal. So that would be for the school board, would need to appeal by September 1st. So then I would say they would need a month from the age. So that would give August 1st as the deadline for the agency to issue its advisory opinion or preliminary decision, whatever we want to call it. So that works back into July, essentially July 1st is when the school board would need to submit their status report to give the agency a month to review that. And I don't know, Anna, if you want to comment on whether that a month would be sufficient time.
At this point, yeah, I would need to talk with the secretary and the general counsel about that. And I can do that this weekend.
But the town, with the board at that time, even if this is upon passage, to do a status report by July.
No. It's tight.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about the governor signing this June 1. All right, well, we'll come back to the dates, okay? Anything else, Oliver, as it relates to this section?
Nope.
Can I ask him a question?
Yeah, Senator Lyons.
I know you said you need 2 months because the board only meets once a month. Is there any compression of that time for this purpose and this purpose only? Just looking at the timeline, it's very compressed. So if it were rather 2 months, if there were a way to take some time away from that and to push it in closer to October, that would give schools a little more time. But you have your experience. I don't know if you have experience with this, because this is kind of a new process. Is there a way you can think it through?
Yeah, I'm thinking back on similar things that we've done, and typically, we intake a request, we have sort of a preliminary discussion, and then we need to come back again to really pull together the analysis and findings and final order. So that's why I do think 2 months is. I think even 2 months, frankly, would be pretty aggressive.
Okay.
And I think if we were to try to do it in less than that, people might look at that and say that, it's not a reasonable amount of time to come to a reasoned judgment.
Okay.
The other thing you could do, but this starts, again, imposing, challenges on other people, but, you could require the prior district to, prepare contingency budget, if you will, but that's just creating a lot of extra work for, the other school district.
If the agency gives them a negative recommendation, then they could say, well, we might have to do it, so we have to do a contingency budget.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're all in agreement, though, we'll change this process where the Agency of Education, Beth, is going to come out with this advisory piece first, and the appeal will go to the State Board of Education, okay?
Yep.
Anything else, Oliver?
Nope, that's it.
So you feel this is a workable check-in? What I'm gonna ask to do is, and there's gonna probably be a lot of people in this community that are gonna wanna do this also, spend some time on Monday talking with Donna and Beth, if anybody just wants to zoom in, if you got a couple hours.
You send me the
Yeah.
link, please.
And you're welcome
And
to
you-
join us, Mr. Oliver, Mr. Oliver. Mr. Olson,
Yeah.
just to
Yep.
get to the point, I just need to get these dates in and a few other things.
No, and you'll definitely want to hear from the, the secretary. I'm sure, he'll have some views, and, who knows, he may not like this at all. It's more work for the agency, less work for the board, more work for the agency, but
But the agency staffs the board sometimes.
yeah, the board has no staff. Exactly.
Which honestly, going through this process with you and having you available for as much time as we have had you continues to concern me around that we are not, in my opinion, compensating the work that we're asking all of you to do on behalf of the state. And I think I know I want to return to that topic. It's not fair, simply. But Ms. St. James, can you continue or is there anything else you want to add as it relates to all of this?
No, section 5 remains unchanged. Section 7 is the situation where there have been votes to approve withdraw that all the communities within the Union School District want or are approving the withdrawal, and the decision sits with the state board.
Section 5, we're still making our way, just right.
Next change is on 167.
Yeah,
page 167.
yeah. So 167, review.
Yep. So this is the same framework as above that we just talked about. So it's the same concept. So I understand that I will be changing that around a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
But I just wanted to point out that at the end, I added the sections regarding, so section 7 is the section that says if the town that wants to withdraw or the district that wants to withdraw has voted, but the rest of the union hasn't ratified that decision yet, then you start at square one. That section remains unchanged. And then section 8 is the moratorium on school closures, and then 9 and 10 are the reporting requirements. I did not put in the moratorium on withdrawals, but I have that drafted. I didn't know where the committee ended up on that.
So why is that? Should that be in yellow or no?
No, it's a very, I'm looking at page 175.
Okay.
So it's not in yellow because it's language that you looked at yesterday. But I was unclear as to where the committee was going with this language, whether you wanted to include it in this bill, whether you wanted to include all of it in this bill, or you wanted to add the a moratorium on withdrawals. I don't think I was clear on where the committee had landed on that.
Mr. Olson, while we have you, would you please weigh in on those sections?
Yeah, on the the school. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to weigh in on the school closure section. That's really outside the board's purview, and I think that's a policy decision for you. I mean, I would point out that though that defining school closures, as you indicated yesterday, is a complicated subject, particularly if you start getting into individual grades. I'm just thinking about my own local school district, and they're looking at creating a regional middle school. And as I read the language, that could really hamstring that effort. So I would just be really cautious about the exact language.
Okay. Committee, temporary moratorium on Union School District school closures.
I think it's gonna help.
I like it, yeah. Open to changes to the definition of closure, if there's a better way of doing it.
I thought we were going to direct them to sort of give us a direction.
That's the next section.
Right, but so how do we kind of get those together? Ms. St. James?
I mean, I think until you have a definition, you have to either cobble one together or wait until you have that definition, which is, again, it's a chicken and egg situation, I think.
Okay. Well, what if we wait to have a definition? What's the problem there?
There's,
Then you can just keep closing it.
I think, I like the definition. I think it gets it started and use that. And then when a better one comes back, we have it. So you've got half the chicken and half the egg.
Yeah, Senator Chin.
Can you do that?
Agreed.
Has to be hard boiled.
I swear to God, this bill doesn't pass out. Okay, let's keep this definition right now. We have time to. So yes, so I think what we're hearing from the committee, Ms. St. James, keep the definition, put the moratorium on school closures.
okay, what a,
And now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Withdrawal. Are we gonna do a moratorium on withdrawal or not?
That's the next question.
Yeah.
Mr. Olson, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I would say a moratorium on withdrawal would not be necessary if you can take that construct that we put together for the accession law and can apply it in a similar fashion to withdrawals. But in the absence of that, I do think that a moratorium would be in order.
So this is a great point in time to have this conversation. So this goes back to your earlier comments about what the work that we just did, put it in the earlier section of the bill, so that, again, people will be required to go through the processes that we just outlined, and therefore it doesn't necessitate the moratorium.
Correct. As long as there's a process where if someone at the state level says this is not a good idea, this is not in the interest of the students in the district, in the region, or the state, that the process can be brought to a halt. As long as that.
Yeah. Will you please go ahead then and I guess, excuse me, make that change?
yes.
You're right.
I'm okay, everybody, don't worry about it. I'm calling 911 yet. Sound good? Okay. Any questions, Ms. St. James?
Just on the report, do you want to keep the school closure report requirement, which starts on page 175, and then the withdrawal process report that starts on 177?
I think we do.
Do we need the withdrawal report? We're not gonna have a withdrawal. I thought the withdrawal report was.
Oh, right, we're gonna basically come up with character.
Because we were gonna stop all the withdrawals, but if we're doing the chunk 2, so there is a withdrawal process that we like, then we don't really need a report, do we?
I think that's true, correct? Mr. Olson?
I would suggest what I think would be really helpful is for the agency and the board to provide a report on at least for the next couple of years on withdrawal activity. So that can essentially be the study committee report, and we can identify what we're seeing, what trends we're seeing, the decisions that have been made, why they were made, and what issues we're finding that might need to be resolved. And then that provides some oversight. You guys can have some oversight. So if you feel the agency and the board aren't doing a good job, then you can make a change.
So like a check-in,
Yeah,
tell us what's going on out there in the no draw world.
how does that sound, Beth?
Sure. Do you want one report every year or a big report in 5 years?
Annual report. I think it makes sense. Sound okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Anything else, Ms. St. James, before we ask you to do a new draft?
No, it sounds like the only changes are updating that reporting requirement, and then the discussion that we've had on the role reversal of AOE and the state board, and then adding that to the section 724 and 725.
Right. So I'm going to ask if possible, there are, we want to be able to share this with colleagues for whom this is going to impact their districts. And I'd like them to see this evening. Is it possible to make those changes sometime this evening?
What define this evening? That's going to be really hard for me. If I logged off now and I didn't have to log back on, I could probably do it. But what time frame are you looking for? Are you looking for?
No, I don't want to interrupt your, honestly, and I mean this sincerely, your day and your evening with family, etc. But I do think now that we've gotten to the stage, we might be fine here on our own if you would indeed like to log off, if that would work for you. 4:56, we can have Senator Pershlick, he's just introducing the amendment. We can do that.
Yeah.
The concepts on his own. And then we can, H703 is more of a, we're gonna have Dr. Boucher in. So it's up to you. Ms. Russo Savage.
I just had one clarification before she does draft, and that's if there is going to be an appeal from the Secretary of Education's decision or evaluation to the agency, does it end at the agency, or is there then the ability to appeal to the Superior Court? Just, I don't care which way it is, but I think that it needs to be stated really clearly in.
Donna, you mean the Secretary's appeal to the board, not to the agency, right?
I'm sorry, the Secretary's appeal,
Yeah.
if they appeal that to the board, excuse me, then, yeah, then is there a further appeal to the Superior Court, or is there not? Just that should be clear, whichever way you intend it to be.
Mr. Olson?
That's a policy decision.
Right.
I don't have a strong feeling. I mean, if I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Have the authority, I mean, couldn't they always appeal to the Superior Court? I mean, on a technicality, or, I mean, like during Act 46, there was all these lawsuits.
Yeah.
And appeals.
People can sue for anything, right? And I think it's rules. It would be a Rule 75 appeal anyway.
Donna?
There are different kinds of appeals. There are appeals for constitutional issues, which are something that you can always appeal. There are appeals for what the final decision is on the facts of the case. And that's what I'm wondering, if on the facts of the case, would the state board's decision be final, or on the facts of the case, could they then go forward with it to the Superior Court? And like I said, I don't care. I just think that it should be very clear in whatever's written.
Well, if we were to say, to be consistent with other education policies that are made that are similar to this, what usually happens?
Well, in the case of merger, when the state board makes the decision that a proposal is acceptable or is not acceptable, that's the final decision, and it doesn't even go to the voters if they decide that it's not acceptable. So it seems that having it end at the state board would be consistent.
I think that makes sense. And keep in mind, you guys are going to be getting an annual report on this activity. So there's a level of oversight there. And at the end of the day, if there's people can petition the legislature.
Committee? Okay, we're gonna leave it, it's gonna end at the state board.
Thank you.
So Ms. St. James, tell us if that works for you, timing.
I just need some direction on when you say this evening.
I'm gonna honestly follow your lead. It can be any time between now and 9 o'clock
Okay,
or midnight. I mean, but I don't, I'm also, I know everybody's under a lot of pressure right now. I'm not looking to add more to your life in any way. If you say, Brian, I just can't do this, that's fine.
I can do this, but to me, there's a difference between 5 p.m. and when I finish it tonight. So if you just want it before the clock strikes midnight, I can definitely do that. If you need it before 7.
I'd love to get this to somebody on Saturday sometime.
Okay, understood.
Understood. 1 o'clock Saturday, 2 o'clock Saturday, supper time Saturday. Honestly, just love to get it to people so they have an opportunity to have a look at it on Sunday. And then I can meet with everybody a little bit more on Monday. We'll be in committee Tuesday. We'll vote it Wednesday. How does that feel?
Sure.
Sure, okay. Questions?
No.
Anything
Good.
else? Oliver, thanks a million.
Thanks. I have to run. Take care. Thank you.
Okay, committee, let's just take 10 minutes and